My dad forgot me every Christmas until I bought a manor. My parents showed up with a locksmith. Dad held up a fake lease. You can't stop us, I smiled. Watch me. They didn't know I had filled the dark house with police and reporters, waiting for them to break down the door. Something unthinkable happened. My father, Marcus, slapped the papers against the glass beside the front door and told the locksmith to drill. My stepmother, Caroline, held up her phone, filming him like he was rescuing people instead of forcing his way into my home. This property belongs to the Open Hearth Foundation, Marcus called. You are blocking emergency housing before Christmas. The locksmith studied the signature page. The owner denied access, sir. My daughter is not the owner in any meaningful sense. She bought this place with opportunities our family gave her. Inside, 2 investigators waited behind the library doors. A county housing inspector stood beside them. 3 reporters sat in the music room with their recorders ready. Caroline leaned toward the intercom. Clara, there are mothers expecting beds tonight. Do you want everyone to watch you lock them outside? There were no mothers waiting for beds. There never had been. I pressed the button. Show the locksmith the witness signature. Marcus glanced down. That is irrelevant. It will not be. The locksmith lowered his drill. Marcus snatched it from him. Some daughters, he said into Caroline's camera, have to be forced to do the decent thing. That sentence sounded new, but the idea behind it had shaped nearly every Christmas I remembered. After my mother died, Marcus married Caroline and turned our family into the public face of his holiday charity. Open Hearth raised money for temporary housing and winter supplies. Every December, cameras filmed Marcus handing keys to families while Caroline hugged children, and my younger stepsister, Paige, carried gift bags. I worked behind the banner. At 13, I addressed donor envelopes while Paige opened presents. At 16, I painted signs, then learned Caroline had left me off the volunteer dinner seating chart. At 19, I repaired a Christmas Eve display while Marcus gave a speech about never letting a child feel forgotten. He forgot to pick me up afterward. I waited outside until the custodian locked the doors. Marcus finally answered and said, "You are old enough to arrange your own ride." The next morning, Caroline posted a family photograph in matching sweaters. Paige held a brass sleigh bell beside her face. The caption read, "Every child deserves to wake up knowing she belongs." I had polished that bell. I thought it was ordinary favoritism until I started noticing changing donation totals and families Marcus described, but nobody had met. Caroline would touch my shoulder and say, "Not every conversation needs an audit, Clara." Then she told relatives I became unstable around Christmas. By my late 20s, I had built a historic restoration company. I repaired old schools and theaters that larger firms avoided. I liked damaged buildings because they left evidence. A water stain did not accuse you of imagining the leak. Marcus wanted free plans. Caroline wanted donated labor, followed by public thanks for Paige. If I refused, I was selfish. If I agreed, I was finally useful. So I stopped agreeing. Briar Glen Manor appeared at a county auction with a leaking roof, unsafe floors, and an abandoned ballroom. I saw a training center where women rebuilding their careers could learn restoration work and live during short projects. I bought it through my company with savings and a business loan. Then the county posted a photograph of me receiving the renovation permit. Paige shared it in the family group chat with the words, "Some people can afford castles, but never have money for family." Marcus called 10 minutes later. "You bought Briar Glen?" I did. "You should have consulted me. That property has history with Open Hearth." I had never heard him mention it. The next morning, a truck arrived carrying 20 metal bed frames. The invoice listed Open Hearth and my address. I refused the delivery. That afternoon, Caroline emailed a press release announcing that Briar Glen would become the foundation's permanent winter residence for mothers in transition. It included a quote from me thanking Marcus for teaching me compassion. I called her. "You announced a program in my house. We assumed you would want the publicity. Remove my name. People donated based on this expansion. We cannot embarrass them because you are having a territorial reaction." "What expansion?" A brief silence. "Your father will explain." Instead of explaining, Marcus invited me to the foundation's Christmas luncheon. I entered a packed hotel ballroom and found a painted image of Briar Glen covering the stage. Beneath it, gold letters read, "A home before Christmas." Marcus met me near the microphone. "Smile. We are announcing the largest housing gift in our history. I did not give you the manor. We will use it for one season and work out ownership later." Caroline appeared beside him, smiling toward the tables. "Do not do this where people can see." Marcus leaned close. "You were never good at being part of a family, Clara. Do not pretend you understand how to save one." He announced that Open Hearth had secured a residence for vulnerable mothers and thanked me for returning to the values I had resisted. When I refused to join him on stage, Caroline told the audience I became emotional under attention. A woman beside me whispered, "At least let the families have Christmas." I left under 200 strangers' judgment. Paige followed me out and said I finally owned something people noticed and simply did not want Marcus near it. I answered, "Then donate your condo." She returned to the applause. By morning, angry messages covered my business page. A radio host called me the contractor who had locked homeless mothers out of a mansion. A supplier delayed my credit application. One client asked whether I was fighting a charity. Marcus had spread the conflict across my home, my work, my reputation, and the community in less than a day. I wanted to post the deed and call him a liar. Instead, I called Nathan Hale, the attorney who handled my contracts. He checked the county file and asked, "Why did Open Hearth apply for a housing permit 4 months before you bought the manor?" The application claimed the foundation had leased Briar Glen for 3 years. It listed dozens of overnight residents, a kitchen inspection that never happened, and a fire review signed by a retired official. Caroline's press release called the manor a new program. The grant file called it an existing one. The next morning, a red envelope appeared beneath my side door. Inside was a photocopied lease between the previous owner and Open Hearth. The legal description included a parcel number created during my purchase. The witness signature belonged to Evelyn Moss, a county archivist who had died before the date on the lease. Someone had written across the bottom, "Keep your name on the deed. Stop making this harder than it needs to be." Was I wrong to look at that fake lease and feel more hurt than angry? If you believe I was not selfish for refusing to hand over my house, please leave a like so I know I am not the only woman who thinks consent still matters inside a family. And if you think I handled it badly, tell me in the comments. After years of being called difficult, part of me still doubted myself even with the deed in my hand. Nathan sent the lease to a document examiner. I walked through every room the foundation claimed had housed families. Most upstairs plumbing had been disconnected for years. Several floors were unsafe. The kitchen had no working range. A shelter could not have operated there without utility use, deliveries, repairs, trash records, or one neighbor remembering children arriving. There was nothing. But beneath a pantry shelf, I found a narrow compartment. Inside lay a tarnished brass sleigh bell tied with a faded red ribbon. It was the bell from Caroline's Christmas photograph. Beside it was a cardboard case filled with campaign contact sheets. The images showed staged beds, wrapped gifts, and women posing beneath Open Hearth banners. Several faces appeared in different years under different names. One little girl stood beside Marcus, holding the bell. The girl was me. I was about 9, wearing a coat Caroline had chosen because it made me look less comfortable. The printed caption read, "Mia arrived with nothing but a paper bag. Open Hearth gave her a room, a family, and a future." My name was not Mia. I had not arrived with a paper bag. After that photograph, Marcus and Caroline attended a donor dinner while I ate alone at home. For years, I believed Marcus hid me because Paige looked better beside the charity banner. The contact sheets suggested something worse. He had hidden me because he had sold my childhood as someone else's tragedy. Nathan contacted Elena Voss, a reporter investigating Open Hearth. She arrived with June Bell, whose father had been Briar Glen's caretaker. June recognized the sleigh bell immediately. "Every December, Marcus brought a crew for one day," she said. "They dressed rooms, filmed families, and left before dark. My father kept asking where the residents were." June's boxes held gate logs, utility readings, and delivery slips. The manor had opened only for photo shoots and donor tours during the years Open Hearth claimed full occupancy. Elena also found supposed residents whose addresses belonged to a storage facility or foundation employees. A former bookkeeper, Ruth Keller, supplied the next link. Marcus had classified payments to Paige's staging company as resident furnishings. Paige placed donated beds in model rooms, photographed them, then resold them through luxury rentals. Ruth remembered that an old label printer stored shipping destinations. They recovered the printer from a church closet. Its memory showed coats, heaters, gift cards, and furniture sent to Paige's warehouse, Marcus's office, and Caroline's brother's vacation property. One code appeared repeatedly, MIA. Ruth explained that MIA meant marketing image account. Donations attached to my photograph had been moved into a fund Marcus controlled. Every December, the invented child returned with a new age and another fundraising promise. Marcus had not forgotten me at Christmas. He remembered the version of me that paid him. His reason for seizing the manor became clear when the county scheduled a surprise grant inspection. Open Hearth had received a major renewal based on the claim that Briar Glen was already operating. If inspectors found an empty building, the foundation would lose funding and face a full review. Marcus needed beds inside, photographs on the walls, and someone willing to claim the lease was real. He also needed the campaign archive. June's father had told him that duplicate photo records remained at Briar Glen. Marcus believed those records were still hidden somewhere inside. The manor was not a home to him. It was a stage, an address, and the last evidence box he could not control. Caroline called that evening and said families should not suffer because Marcus was under pressure. "Name one family who slept at Briar Glen," I said. "Confidentiality prevents that. Did you call me Mia?" The line stayed quiet long enough to answer me. Then she asked, "Where did you hear that?" I hung up. Within an hour, Marcus emailed another lease with a different start date and copied donors, board members, the county, and reporters. He warned that removing foundation property could be theft. Instead of frightening me, he gave investigators a time-stamped record of his claim. They wanted him to present the lease as genuine and attempt possession. I replied that Briar Glen would be available for the county inspection on the morning before Christmas Eve. He could bring his documents and any representative he believed he had the right to use. "Finally, a mature decision," he answered. I cleared one safe path through the manor. Reporters waited in the music room, investigators behind the library doors, and the county inspector near the staircase. June placed the bell beside the contact sheets. From outside, the house looked empty. At sunrise, Marcus arrived with Caroline, Paige, a locksmith, and a van carrying folded cots. Caroline began recording before they reached the porch. Paige wore an Open Hearth badge and carried a box marked Resident Files. The locksmith read the lease and asked for identification from the current owner. Marcus pointed at the house. "The owner is my daughter. She is obstructing our tenancy because of a personal grudge." Through the intercom, I told them they had no permission to enter. Caroline turned her phone toward the steps. "This is retaliation. Open Hearth is ready to house families, but one angry person is refusing access. The locksmith handed back the papers. I cannot drill without clearer authority. Marcus smiled toward Caroline's camera, took the drill, and raised it to my lock. You cannot stop us. I pressed the intercom. Watch me. The bit scraped the brass plate. Marcus damaged the cylinder, forced the door inward with his shoulder, and crossed the threshold holding the fake lease above his head. The alarm sounded, the library doors opened. Investigators identified themselves. A uniformed officer moved between Marcus and the staircase. The county inspector asked Caroline to keep recording. Paige dropped her box, and blank resident form slid across the floor. Marcus looked offended, not frightened. This is a lawful charity inspection. My daughter staged an ambush. Elena and the other reporters entered from the music room. Caroline whispered, You said there would be no press. Marcus turned toward me. Mia, tell them this is a family misunderstanding. Nobody moved. He had called me Mia. Caroline's phone lowered. Paige stared at him. Elena looked from my face to the old photograph. Marcus corrected himself too quickly. Clara! I said Clara! The inspector lifted the campaign picture. Who is Mia? I held up the sleigh bell. Mia was the child Open Hearth claimed to rescue. They used her story for more than 20 years. Elena placed the contact sheet beside my face. The resemblance needed no explanation. Caroline began talking before anyone accused her. The name was fictional. Campaigns use models. Marcus handled the money. Paige snapped. You wrote the caption. You approved the warehouse transfers. They were temporary. The family that always agreed on my flaws could not agree on its own history. Investigators separated them and collected the phones, leases, drill, and blank resident files. Marcus named a case manager who had left before the claimed dates. Caroline described an inspection the county had never recorded. Paige said the furniture was stored for safety, then could not explain why her company had sold it. The unthinkable part was Caroline turning her phone toward Marcus and asking, in the soft voice she once used on me, Did you put my signature on the grant forms? Do not perform for the cameras, he snapped. That is what you taught all of us to do. Marcus and Paige were taken for questioning. Caroline surrendered her phone, touched the bell, and said, You always hated that picture. I hated being told it never happened. She glanced at the broken lock. This did not have to become public. You made my childhood public. I corrected the caption. The full reveal came that evening at Open Hearth's awards banquet. Marcus planned to call the manor incident a private property dispute, but the board chair invited Elena to present the records investigators had cleared for release. The screens showed gate logs, shipping labels, false occupancy reports, staged rooms, and the photograph of Mia. I carried the brass bell to the microphone and told the donors I had never been rescued by Open Hearth. I was Marcus's daughter. He had changed my name, used my face to raise money, and taught me that remembering it made me difficult. Ruth confirmed the shipping codes. June confirmed the photo days. The county inspector confirmed Briar Glen had never been licensed for residence. Then, Elena played recovered audio of 9-year-old me asking whether I could stay for the donor dinner. Marcus's recorded voice answered, Not tonight. They need to believe Mia has nowhere else to go. A donor removed her Open Hearth pin. The board suspended Marcus and Caroline, ended Paige's contracts, and placed the remaining funds under independent control. Marcus reached for the microphone. You are watching a bitter daughter punish families because she felt overlooked. I set the bell on the podium. No. You overlooked your daughter because the invented child paid better. Then I walked away and let the records finish the story. The county froze the grant, and the state opened a charity fraud case. An outside audit found years of payments routed through Paige's company and Caroline's relatives. Marcus was charged with fraud, false filings, and unlawful entry. Paige admitted she knew the manor was not operating as a shelter. Caroline's messages showed she wrote false resident stories and coached staff to avoid direct questions. Months later, Marcus accepted restitution and a ban on managing charitable funds. Caroline received penalties and community supervision. Paige lost her contracts, sold her warehouse, and moved away. Some relatives apologized for believing the manor story. Few apologized for the Christmases they had watched me stand outside the family photograph. Marcus sent letters blaming the board, Caroline, and finally me. He asked me to sign a statement saying Open Hearth had intended to use Briar Glen someday because it might protect his retirement. I returned one sheet for the legal file. On it I wrote, My name will not rescue you again. Caroline left voicemails about forgiveness. Paige said she had been raised to believe everything belonged to the family if Marcus needed it. I answered neither of them. Briar Glen opened the following autumn as a restoration training center. The first group included a widow returning to construction, a mother rebuilding her credit after a controlling marriage, and 2 young women leaving foster care. They learned plaster repair, window glazing, estimating, and how to read every page before signing their names. I kept the damaged brass lock in a glass case near the entrance. Beside it, I placed the fake lease and the old photograph of Mia. I changed the caption. It read, Clara was never rescued by Open Hearth. She survived being used by it. On Christmas morning, I carried the sleigh bell to the restored porch. June had replaced the cracked clapper, and one of the trainees tied on a new red ribbon. Behind me, women moved through the manor with coffee, tool belts, and plans for rooms that belonged to no one's performance. I locked the gate, slipped my own key into my pocket, and rang the bell once. For the first time, it called only the people who were truly welcome.